I'm Brent David Fraser. I went to high school with a friend of mine who's an actor now, Billy Burke, and we were hanging out, and I was very social in high school. I didn't go to a lot of classes. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was always a class clown. I was always very entertaining. I grew up singing and playing music and doing all that kind of stuff. I never really got into drama club until my senior year in high school. But when we were still in Bellingham, we were hanging out. We were outside in his big Delta 88. It was I think a summer evening. It was very classic Americana kind of. We were waiting for a friend of ours to go get some money from his dad and come get in the car. And Billy says, "So Fraser, what are you going to do with your life? What's your dream? What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "I don't know." And I'd been saying stockbroker for, and that was just like, I'd been asked this a couple of times, and I was like, you know, you need to have an answer for this question, and we pick one that sounds good, you know. Stockbroker, oh, you know. And I said, I don't know, stockbroker. And he goes, what? And I was like, yeah, what? It's not good? And he said, no, it's not good, you idiot. You know, and I was like, why? What's wrong with that? And he goes, no, I don't know. I guess I always thought you'd do something in the entertainment field. And I had this dream inside to do that. I mean, I had this, but I had there wasn't anything in my immediate world that would, I didn't have a plan of how a person did that, you know? And, but internally, I made a decision, you know, at that, and he was going to do the same thing. You know, we were sort of on this, you know, we started out on this path together. So, you know, it was, internally I made that decision. And when I moved to Seattle, I started to do semi-professional theater. And then a couple of films came to town, and I got the chance to audition for those. I did a couple of non-union films there, and then a couple of films that were union films, and I got my Taft-Hartley contract on The Chocolate War, which means you become SAG eligible, and that was my first union thing. And then class of 1999, I joined the union. You know, the casting director from that film said, you know, I'm going to go into management. Kathy Henderson, she was just such an amazing lady, colorful, big lady, not big like just a big personality. She was awesome, and totally like go-getter. And yeah, and I came down. I actually I got into some legal trouble and just stupid stuff. I have a lot of stupid stuff in my long story. And it was a good time to leave Washington. And she was like, why don't you come and give it a try in LA? And I thought, perfect, I'm out of here. So, and I got to LA and I booked a film in like on day 3 of being here. And I booked a film that took like, well, about another year and a half to actually get rolling on, Jezebel's Kiss with Malcolm McDowell and Meg Foster. And then I got a Disney Channel movie with Robert Urich like a week and a half later, and that was a good one. It filled my pockets with money, and I was off and running.
So what is it?
I want to talk to you.
About what?
About your work.
My work speaks for itself.
I've been, you know, known to be like a professional bridge burner or foot shooter, and I had these periods where I'd do really well for a while, and then I'd get all screwy and wreck a bunch of stuff, and I'd have to like pull myself back together and make a comeback. All classic, you know, nothing original, drugs, alcohol, that kind of stuff, and a horrible attitude and a really overblown sense of myself. So I was in one of these phases, and this movie came along, and it was not a big film or whatever, but it was a good cast. It was a decent script. It was gonna, you could tell it was gonna be like cool, dark, moody, you know, and it was, you know, intense, and the art stuff. I mean, it just all had this potential, and I really wanted the film. Whether it was gonna, be another one of these comebacks that I was known for making, we didn't know, but it had some potential. And So I went and auditioned, and it came down to, I was sitting there with Phedon, and he had dated, I think this had more to do with getting the role than almost anything. There were two things. He had dated Drew Barrymore, and he'd seen me, he'd met me, seen me. I vaguely recollected this party that supposedly we'd been at. And he'd met me. He's like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, sure, you know. But he was a really, I mean, it wasn't solely contingent upon that. I had to earn the part. And I was up against this actor, Peter Green, and he died. He was a really good, intense guy, and it was me and him. And I went in for it, and I was just like, I'm going to lay it all out on the table. And I thought they had a few script problems. So I went in and I just said, you know, you've got some challenges with the script here. And you know, the deal is, if you don't hire me, I don't think that you're going to find anyone else who can make those script challenges work. And they were like, and it's not the kind of thing I would characteristically say. It sounded really boastful, and but I just laid it out. I said, you know, I know how to handle this material, and I don't think anyone else does. And they knew they had a few script problems, and they trusted what I said, and they hired me. And it was a big deal for me to beat out Peter Green, because there was a lot of excitement on him at the time. I think he'd been in Reservoir Dogs, and I was such an idiot, I didn't even go in on Reservoir Dogs. I was like, I don't get it, you know. And everyone in Hollywood wanted to be in this movie, and he was in this movie, and so to have him come back around for something that was such a competitive piece at the time, and I had relatively nothing, and I egoed my way, you know, basically into the role. Or at least that's as I remember it. But it was definitely more of my name above the title. It was the biggest billing that I had had. It felt more substantial in terms of like really sort of carrying the film. I liked the art aspect of it. I'd been a painter when I was a kid. Actually, when I was a kid, probably the thing I was for sure thought I was going to do was be a painter when I grew up. So I liked that. I hadn't painted in a long time, and I was going to get to do some of that just for film, but it sounded like fun. And I think the kind of character was more multi-dimensional. I mean, there's the intensity of the artist and a sort of mental, you know, that traumatic thing that had happened. So there was the playing of that, and it was also a love. You know, there was this. You know, it was a romantic lead. You know, so it had it was multi-dimensional, it had lots of different aspects, you know. And it was my first time I was really, because I kept my facial hair and, you know, they wanted me to be able to play older. I was playing much older than I was. It was my first sort of, like, man, you know, adult man kind of role.
Like being in the seventh circle of hell, huh?
Finola Hughes was great to work with. She's a really, you can tell, you know, if you just watch her, if you've ever seen her interviewed, you watch her work, you can tell she was a really classy lady. And she was a lot of fun. She had a great sense of humor. She was very willing to try things, you know, in work. She's a good actress, you know. She's, with that much experience, you know, people want to like bag on soaps and that kind of stuff, but those actors, they're consummate professionals. They're technically perfect most of the time, you know, at least she is. So, and she's beautiful, and she was fun, and she would tell stories of, you know, got an Irish family, and she would tell these stories of this character. He was like I think he was a town drunk or something like that. His name was, and he would say, "Oh, Christ," and his name was Christy, so they'd call him Christy Christ. And so she'd tell these stories that Christy Christ would, you know, these little anecdotal kind of stories and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun, and her husband would hang out on set sometimes, and he was a really cool guy, a really cool convertible, if I remember. Really cool guy. They were fun people to have around.
Why the particular interest in Julian Johns?
Why not? He's very much like me. Single-minded, Obsessed? Haunted? You could say I've been waiting for Julian Johns to come along.
Timur Cassell, I mean, you know, one of a kind, that guy. He was fun, he's big, he's a big personality, you know, and he's really straightforward, and he's done so many films. He's, again, you know, total professional, but he likes to joke around, he likes to make light of things, and you know, and he's inventive. He's one of those actors that'll come up with things, you know, to try to create a moment, you know, on film, and so he's not, there's nothing stale in the working of it. So it's always lively, and you know, and just fun. You know, the guy's a kick. He's crazy. He's really, he's like certifiable, but in a good way. Beauchot. I was excited to have him in the movie just because of his European appeal. And he's a really, you know, he's a well-known and serious actor. I've had the chance on a few jobs to work with, you know, different European actors, and they just have a great style and approach. So it was just cool to have him.
You know, if you're trying to get laid, I can think of an easier way to do it.
Moon was a kick. She's just funny and fun. She makes jokes a lot. She's really dry humor. Good, healthy sarcasm, and really fun. And I, you know, and of course, you know, you could talk for hours about, you know, wanting to pick her brain about her dad, their brother, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're an amazing family, so that was great.
Julian, you're a great artist. Your work stands tall on its own. But you know, you've got a certain notoriety too, and if we can make that work for us, that's the name of the game, isn't it?
He was just a really nice, you know, really nice guy, really sweet, really warm. He was perfect for the role, and he was so much of that character, but he sort of accentuated certain characteristics and you know, made things funnier, bigger, you know, than they were in the script, you know, sort of. He really filled out the character with, you know, stuff that he wanted to bring to it. And he was just, you know, he was a gentleman, sweet. I mean, all these people were just like, you know, there wasn't anyone besides me who was like difficult or hard to be around. Phedon Papamichael. Phedon was a terrific guy, and he was really, like, he had fresh ideas and was fun. And it's always interesting to get to work with a director who's also a cinematographer, a good cinematographer. You know, his capability with a camera to come up with what shot was going to work. You know, we didn't have a lot of extra, you know, in the budget for things, so sometimes, you know, he'd have to, you know, you got to be able to be inventive, and a guy who's so adept with a camera like that, and in working with actors, you know, so he knows the motion of the camera, and he also understands what needs to be picked up with the actors. His sensitivity to both, the combination of those things, is, you know, it's just a pleasure to have, because it gives you this confidence. You know you're going to get it. You know it's not going to be some goofy, weird, static shot. There's the one cover that you're probably familiar with half of Finola's face, and then the names and whatever. There had been this other European. I gave it to the producers for this release. I had it. It was a card that they were using for the American film market, the AFM thing that they do at Lowe's Hotel, and I'd grabbed a pile of these when we were there, and it was more for like European sale. It had the girl laid out; she was naked, and I had we'd had this scene that we were going to do where Finola's supposed to be having a nightmare that I appear in. Because she's, you know, getting to where, like, is he the killer, is he not? You know, so we thought, what are we going to do for this? We're supposed to have me be this horrifying, scary, whatever. And we're in the makeup trailer, and we're, like, joking around, really seriously not. We just thought, let's freak out Phedon and, like, come with some ridiculous idea. So we painted my whole face red. I I think I started putting lipstick. She goes, no, 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 stop. She pulls out this red thing, smears red all over my face, and I'm supposed to be perched on this metal thing that was sticking out of the ground, and so I come out, I'm in my underwear, and I have this red face, and I thought he's, you know, going to flip out, and he goes, oh, I love it. And it became the image that they used on the sales card for the European thing, the film market, and all of that. That's really not a very funny anecdotal thing, but it was one of the things it's one of the things that I can remember as being completely accidental, and it turned out to be actually a really cool thing. The soundtrack guy was a guy named Tom Hiel. And I was, at the time, I had been doing some sessions. I'd had a new music manager, this guy Andy Slater, and I'd been doing some sessions with Warren Zevon and the Beastie Boys and some of Don Henley's band. And so I had this music on tape. Yeah, so Phedon just asked about it. Again, like that, oh, well, yeah, I'd love to hear that. Like, not in that weird way that people BS you and say, oh, sure, let me hear it, you know. Oh, yeah, we're not going to be able to use that. You know, I mean, I just handed him a tape, and he's like, yeah, we want to use 2 of these songs. And they were both, we would do recording when I was, you know, working with all those people, and then we'd kind of give everyone a rest, and then Andy would say, why don't we just knock out a couple of acoustic tunes? So, so these were a couple of the songs. One's called Peace Be On Your Ashes, and one's called Strawberry Lane. And he wanted to use these. One is the sort of montage painting scene, and they use Strawberry Lane in that, and then and the one in the end of the film is called Peace Be On Your Ashes. And it's sort of about someone dying and an internal kind of a death. I mean, they worked for the film with stuff that Andy and I were doing, and you know what he wanted to do with these things. We didn't really know exactly what the ultimate destination for any of that music was going to be, but you know, it just by happenstance ends up on the soundtrack for this film. That was kind of cool.
He's not Julian.
How very perceptive of you, Miss Cole. You know, I made that same observation at the opening.
There were times on the set where they were like rewriting or tweaking little things, timeline things and stuff like that, and those all worked. And I was watching it thinking, wow, that worked, cool, you know. And at the end, it was just a little. I felt that my performance really lacked in the end, and I always hate that because there it is, it's done, it's immortalized, and you can't go back and change it, you know. And I would have done some things differently. But I remember on the set that day in that climax scene feeling like it's the only time in the film where I felt there was kind of a static, you know, whatever. And luckily it flows on out to the rooftop scene before the credits roll, and it's where I've had this psychic break and I understand everything that's happened now. And so it's a good, strong finish between Finola and me. But overall, I thought for what we were working with, you know, in terms of money, and for so many people with their capability to work on the fly and to do this, you know, and the whole great feeling of the people and all that, to see it come together and see that it worked, and really, you know, it's like to see everyone happy with it, you know. I mean, you know, and I might be being nitpicky about my own, you know, my own critique of my own performance, you know, at different points. But overall, it was just great to see. It was like, wow, it was really cool looking. It was shot in a really cool place. It had this great cast. Everyone, you know, brought so many different kinds of characters to bring them all together and have them work in their different ways. You know, so many different acting styles and everything. I just thought, you know, it was really cool. I was really proud of this film. Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate with this film. When this company kind of disappeared, you know, I would see every now and then this film getting played, you know, in some market overseas. IMDb keeps a kind of a loose track of that, so I'd see it playing in Britain or something on TV or something like that, cable over there. And really after this company kind of disappeared, some people went on obviously to sell it and profit from it, But I haven't seen a residual or a royalty from any thing from this film probably in 15 years. When I was making the attempted comeback thing, gotten this new manager and this agent that I'd worked with, and she was ready to kind of like, okay, we're really going to do this, and I hadn't worked and whatever, and I seemed to have this, go get it, whatever kind of attitude, this stick-to-itiveness, or this new whatever. So they were kind of, I think that these new representatives are kind of exciting, because I'd gone out and nabbed this film from Peter Green, and and there are all these good people attached to it and whatever. So, and my heart was really in the whole thing, and I really wanted to see it do well, and blah 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 blah, and then it turned out they saw the film, and they're like, yeah, this really isn't the kind of, she wanted the agent, this woman, Jennifer Haggany, she doesn't agent anymore. She's married to, went and got married to Andrew Shue, who's one of the 90210 actors. And anyway, she had wanted this to be a piece that she could then go into United Talent. They don't exist anymore, but they were a big agency. And I'd been with them before, but I went back to her, and she's like, we need something that'll be exciting. And she wanted to be able to take this in, and she saw the film, and she's like, yeah, this isn't the kind of film that's going to get everyone excited over there. And because they were, they weren't really, the low-budget film, independent market, it was if it hadn't, like, really, so it was really hard to get people to, now it's just a fact of the industry, but it was hard then. So the thing I had all this hope for, because I personally was so attached to the film, turned out to be, I had to then go find a different agent. Not because they thought it was a bad film, just because they wanted like a showpiece that was a bigger and glitzier and showed more money and whatever, like A-list kind of film. And this just wasn't that. This was just a cool independent film. Malcolm McDowell, Meredith Baxter, Meg Foster. She was, those crystalline blue eyes, and she was just a wonderful lady, really earthy, really smart, really just a full personality. And Malcolm, was great. He had this big motorhome, and it was interesting. You get these little tastes of people's lives, because he had this new girlfriend. I think his wife brought his kids to, his ex-wife, Mary Steenburgen, brought his kids to the set one time so you get to meet the kids. And then there's Mary Steenburgen. And then, you sort of, we're up in Eureka, and which is beautiful, and Trinidad, those beaches up there and all that great coastal stuff. And, you're working with, when I was a teenager, A Clockwork Orange, this is Malcolm McDowell. Some stuff that I'd gone, when I was a kid and wanted to find when I was going to, studying actors. I went, and the people that had been culturally impactful, I went and started to want to see other work of theirs. And so then you're on the set, and the guy's playing your dad, and I remember I shoot myself in front of him. He's this father I can't please, and it's just never going to be good enough. And he goes and steals Jezebel away, from me, and he kind of taunts me with why is she going to be with you? Everything you have is mine, And then he says, I'm the source and you're nothing, whatever. And then I have this gun. I want to shoot him, but I shoot myself in front of him. That's going to be a greater punishment, whatever. We're shooting that film, we're shooting that scene, and we do he's the star, he's Malcolm McDowell. They always shoot the star first. So we shoot him first, and I gave everything in my off-camera, because I just thought that's what you're going to do. And they finished with his. I really didn't have much. I basically had to technically cried and sort of, you know, essentially what we call faking it through the turnaround on me. But when we finished that that part, he stopped the whole set and said, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to take notice of a real actor who he just sat here for every take and gave me everything he had, you know. And when Malcolm McDowell, it gives me a shiver now just saying it, you know, when someone like that says that kind of thing. And it was very gratifying. Really cool guy. And it's nice, you know, I always do that with people that I work with to point out how great a job they're doing if they are doing that, because it's just, you know, it's the kind of thing that people who drop their, no one's trying to be the bigger ego. That's a person who's like the ability to be humble with other people and acknowledge their efforts and that kind of stuff. That's just classy. Those are the real professionals. Those are the guys with longevity in their careers. Catherine and I reconnected many years later. Actually, I had an old IMDb headshot that Catherine shot for me. And I forget how we ran into each other. Somewhere socially. And she was with her daughter. I remember I would see her daughter in a social setting, and before I knew that it was her daughter, and she was, you know, this gorgeous girl, you know, and guys that I didn't would be like, oh my God, who is that, you know, and then one time she was with her mom, and I'm like, Catherine, and then I'm like, Sasha, you know, because the last time I'd seen her, she was 8 years old. So yeah, it was cooler than hell, you know. And they lived in this place over in Beverly Hills. Catherine and I would go grab food sometimes and whatever, and she shot my headshot, and it was cool. We hung out for a bit. It was just kind of cool to reconnect. And she was like, she'd be hanging out, you know. She and her mom lived together. She was completely like this teenage, you know. All of the, like, you know, this Beverly Hills teenager, kind of like, I was totally uninteresting to her at all. This is like her mom, you know, she's like rolling her eyes all the time, like, oh, Mom, you know, like, totally like, it's so cool to be so utterly unimportant to someone, and like, oh yeah, you know, like whatever, whoever, when I was 8 years old, who cares, you know, what, you know, who, what was your name again? I mean, she wasn't mean about it, but it was like I just could not be less interesting, you know, to her. So that was kind of funny. I feel weird calling it Wild Orchid 2 because it started out as Blue Movie Blue, which I thought was good, and then they one called it Wild Orchid 2 because they thought that they would somehow dupe the audience who liked Wild Orchid into going and seeing, and then, you know, obviously people are going to feel jilted because they go and see it and they're like, Mickey Rourke's not in this. There's nothing to do with, no connection at all, and people feel like, you know, dick, you know. So, and that wasn't Zalman's idea at all. That was the marketing people who'd gotten their hands on it, and you know, and I think it did a real disservice to the film. But anyway, you know, Zalman's got a very European style. You know, he's got his own approach, and he's, you know, the guy had been an actor for a long time. He was also a terrific musician for a long time. Very sad about his recent death, because I always sort of, you know, when you work with Zalman, it's very familial. You know, I became friends with his daughters, hung out at his house a couple times, that kind of stuff. You know, it's very familial kind of thing, so you get attached to people. And that set had a lot of that kind of feel too. You know, Nina Shimosko and I doing that. It drew us really close. It was just, there was a lot about it that you know, I remember my girlfriend, Perry Reeves, this other actress I was with at the time, and you know, like the intimacy of this was like going to be a threat to our relationship, because the intimacy of, you know, my scenes with Nina and all that kind of stuff. Just stuff like that. I mean, you really get enmeshed in people's lives, you know. It spreads out into it becomes your life or something like that everyone, you know, it's very, you know, intimate kind of stuff. So that was, you know, that was really wonderful in terms of that. And I remember the other thing that was really cool about that film is that the guys that came down to, to get that role were me and Brad Pitt, and I got, and he was, I think he'd done Thelma and Louise, or the guy was hot at that time. He'd done a series, TV series that did okay, but it put him out there. I mean, it was like he could. Obviously, we know what was going to happen with his career, so I was always pretty gratified to know that I was the one that ended up with that role, not him. Robert was terrific. I mean, he's like, he's a really solid, like he has this, this kind of loyalty, kind of, he's protective of people. He's a big fan of Robert Davi, but he's great. It's not offensive or anything like that. It's entertaining, and he plays with it, and he tells you about his singing career. He's got a great voice. He's actually a really fantastic singer, and we talk a little bit about that. Our actual screen time together is minimal, so really it's more of just like the hanging out on the set, and he's a great guy to hang out with. I think Zalman, we'd talk now and then, and I think he called me up and he said, hey, I got this thing I think that you want to do. It's kind of a continuation of the character that you played in Wild Orchid 2. And talked about the character, Josh, and that's not who I was in the Red Shoe Diaries, but the essence of the character was sort of like 10 years later or something like that, is what it's sort of the feel, because who this kid was in high school and who he was later, and it was similar in that way, and that was interesting to me, that take on it. So he said, do you think you'd want to do it? It shoots in Paris. And I said, yeah. I mean, I said, well, I should probably read it, but I can guarantee there's nothing in it that will make me not want to go shoot this in Paris. So I wrote out to his production office, and we chatted for a while, and I went over the script, and it was like, cool, awesome, and it was like days later, there we were, and and one of the cool things was his daughter Gillian Lefkowitz, who's a terrific artist and a great photographer. She always did all of his set photography, so she was going to be there. So I'd already worked with her. We'd already become friends on Wild Orchid 2, and other guys. There was a guy, Rafi Eisenman and Butch Kaplan. Those guys were really great guys. And I just, God, I just remember myself in that job. I just thought it was the shit. I was such a, God, what an arrogant, Jesus. I remember, and I couldn't hardly, my French was pretty okay. After being in a French-speaking country for a little bit, I'll get to be, my accent's really good and whatever, but initially, I had a hard time relating to the director. Her name was Liddy Callier, and she was she'd done music videos. And her manager, this woman Odile, she was really great, and she was the kind of the conduit between the two of us. And I couldn't, and Liddy Callier, her English was not terrific. So she had ideas, she couldn't really communicate, and we'd have a translator, and it was kind of disjointed. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it made it difficult at times, and so when I don't understand something someone's saying, I sort of start to get a kind of a defensive or a fearful position, like you wonder if this person even knows what she's talking about, and am I just mistaking it, or is it her? Is she just dumb, or whatever? You come up, the fearful mind comes up with all kinds of weird things it'll tell you to think and do. It's ridiculous. So. I remember there being times that I was just utterly resistant to something because I didn't understand it, wasn't sure that it would be good. And you're dealing with, you're going to be naked, and there's all this kind of stuff you need to be exposed, and it can be sort of fear-inspiring anyway to do that kind of work. And so I remember Rafi, the producer, coming up and explaining to me, like, you you know, you can't just, you know, she says do this and you don't even ask any questions and you just say no. Yeah, because she would come up and say something, and if I didn't get it, I'd just go, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, like, who are you? What do you mean you're not going to do that? You're not even going to try, you know? I wouldn't, like, and I don't know why I was, you know, acting like that other than some of the obvious things that I've already said. And he would go, you can't just say no, you're not going to do that. Like, because you're just an asshole. You just, you know, I'm sure, I don't know if you have to bleep this stuff out or not. But yeah, yeah, you know, and it hit me. It was good that he like sat me down and like said, you're just being such a jerk. You're just being such an asshole. Like, you can't do that. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, like it finally kind of sunk in. I felt horrible after that. I realized like I'd just been putting this lovely French woman through, you know, these ridiculous, you know, personality foibles of my own. It was really silly. Pamela was like she was really fun. It was like, she thought I was just like sad. Pamela had, you know, she'd had boyfriends, you know, she was Pamela always sort of had this air about her that she was, you know, I mean, you know, she's a very confident woman. She's way more, the point was she was way more adult than I was or am. She was mature, you know. But she could, not that she couldn't, you know, it wasn't like she was older than her age, she was just mature. She thought guys like me were like just ridiculous, you know, like I was just like a kid, an adult who would not grow up, you know. And so I would not be her idea of like, you know, a love interest or something like that. We would be more like siblings, you know, really. And she liked to like flip, you know, like flip shit and, you know, have this kind of attitude. And we'd kind of bicker back and forth sometimes in a really playful, fun way. And that made it fun. We could like joke with each other. And, but I just remember, like, I think we got done with that. I can't remember what happened to I think my motorcycle, I think I'd wrecked it or whatever. It was in the shop and I had to rent a car. And I rented a big 4-door Cadillac. And I don't know why, you know. I rolled up and like that was, you know, such an adult car. She's like, it was almost like, what's wrong with him? You know, because that is not his style at all. She thought, what, is he finally growing up or something? You know, that kind of thing. She would make comments like that. She was a lot of fun. It was easy to do. You know, it made it real easy. We had a sort of camaraderie. It made it real easy to do the scenes that we had to do together. And JT Walsh was just like, he was really fun to hang out with. You know, it's just so too bad that he passed. You know, that he passed away. He was, I mean, he was a guy, he was just a total veteran. This guy had done so many films. He could tell you so much. He knew the ins and outs of everything, you know. And he didn't sweat about anything. I mean, the guy, he was a total pro, knew his lines, just, you know, whatever. And you know, and this real acerbic, sort of sarcastic kind of, you know, I mean, nothing fazed this guy, you know. And we got to hang out sometimes, have some dinners with the cast, and there was Dwight, you know, I'd been a Dwight Yoakam fan for, you know, since I was a teenager, and so working with a guy like that, you know, you're working with, again, that thing of, you know, an icon. You're just sitting and having dinner with him, you know. And JT brought his son one time. His son was a really cool guy, and you know, we'd all have these dinners and a couple times. Not like we had dinners all the time, but these were people that were really enjoyable to hang out with, and they were all like, Dwight is a really, that guy's, you know, I want to say like he's a scholar in certain fields. The guy, he would, you know, tell stories of all kinds of things that he knew about. I mean, he's so much, you know, you see this guy on stage with his hat tilted down and he plays this really, you know, traditional bluegrassy kind of vibe. I mean, he's a traditionalist, really, in the country music field, except for some of the, you know, he's done other stuff as departures, and they've always been big hits, but you see him as kind of like, you know, you don't get much of the Dwight that when you sit and talk to him, the guy knows about tons of stuff. He could go on for, you know, all things about Tesla and think tanks and just all this kind of physics, science, all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's the most compelling thing about him. When you sit down and talk to him, you're like, he's so much more than just this country star. And I remember we were gonna fight. We had this fight where I beat him up, and he wanted to feel like, you know, discomfort. He wanted to have some kind of real discomfort register on camera, and he put duct tape on his torso, you know, and he had like hair, you know, and he wanted it to like grab and tighten and whatever to create this feeling. I mean, that's a kind of inventiveness of, you know, for an actor that is, you know, it's just like, wow, cool. When people are working like that, when they're trying to think of things like that to make it better, rather than like coasting through a role, you know, all those, you know, so yeah, so those people were awesome to work with. Fame LA was a terrific, it was an awesome opportunity. I really regret what I just had this attitude doing that thing. We weren't quite. I remember I'd done a pilot presentation thing a few years, many years before, I think about 5 or 6 years before. And I was doing my band thing, and I was doing this pilot thing, and I was like, I've always done music and, you know, but for so many years, nobody cares now. People do, you just do whatever. You can't be overexposed now. Or you can't be, you know, like you can do commercials, have a music career, do films, do a TV series, be a host, you know, whatever. It doesn't, you know, but for the longest time, people would always push you to like choose one or the other, you know. And in terms of actually bringing those two together, I hadn't yet, you know, attempted that. I'd sort of kicked the idea around for along came this show. But the thing was, they'd written this, they'd went and auditioned for it. And this was another one of my, like, I was on another comeback. And what was horrible was that I'd been sober for a while, you know, and I was really actively trying to, like, uncover lots of the stuff about myself and whatever, but I also was really still, like, my ego was just out of control, you know, and I had reactions, I had habitual reactions to things that were still just ingrained, you know, that were fear-based and that kind of stuff, and I brought those all into, you think like, oh, somebody gets sober, they get better, you know, and I don't think I was any better in that period of being sober, and I think that's why it, you know, ultimately at that time didn't last, is that I still would react, you know, my ego and my, you know, I would cover and defend my ego with things like arrogance and judgment, and I would, you know, like, I remember going into one of the writers on that thing and telling her why the scene that she'd written didn't work. And not in a, you know, in a really abrasive, in a really arrogant, like, you can come in and talk to people about their work. There's nothing wrong with that. But I had this attitude, like, that they just, you know, like, you don't get it and I do. And I didn't really get it, you know, that's like, ironically. So I went about offending my coworkers, you know, in various personal ways, due to my attitude and my actions, unfortunately, on that. And they had created this role for me. The role was a comedian that was a brother to the Chris Kane character. And I came in and I sang True Companion by Mark Cohn, and they loved it. They actually kept the track, the audition track. That's the track. We went and tried to do it, you know, let's do it for real. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to we're going to use the audition track. It's better. You can't top it. And they'd made the character into a musician, you know, and and we had the same name and everything. I mean, basically it was me. you know, and they did this. They were so excited about having me and whatever, and I would just like, if I didn't like something or I was scared of it, you know, if I was scared of how it was going to make me look, my musician credibility or my whatever, and all these weird imagined scenarios. My head was making up stories about, and they were all negative, you know. And unfortunately, I took that out on the, you know, those producers who had so graciously brought me into this. And I wanted to, everyone else signed on for 2 years. The show only went 1 year. But here's another example of a huge blunder of mine. I was like, no. We'll see how the film does, the TV series does after a year, and then I'll sign on for year 2. Like, what? What are you thinking? So they end up, you know, going for 2 years. These are pay-or-play deals. They all got paid. They all got paid for every episode. They got the full amount of their deal. Me, I'm like, no. I only want to do like 7 episodes and not necessarily want to do the second year because what if the show sucks? No one cares if the show sucks. You know, it's a syndicated. It was just stupid, just utter stupidity, you know, on my part. So totally short-sighted. So other than that, all that dramatic garbage, I had a great time working with those people. And it was familial. It was like we were a bunch of brothers and sisters, you know, and they offered to give us dance. You know, I got to take some tap lessons. I got to work with great songwriters, you know, other great musicians. I mean, they hired the best people in the business. And this guy, Robbie Buchanan, who did all the, you know, headed up all the recordings. The guy was great. Jeff Pollock was the music supervisor. He was one of the partners at Trilogy, and he was in charge of a lot of the music. And he was getting married to this woman named Darcy, and she was a wonderful, wonderful lady. And her favorite thing was my recording of True Companion. So she wanted me to sing at their wedding. So, of course, I agreed. And I was even sick. My throat was just hoarse. Well, Jeff Pollock had worked with everybody imaginable in the business. Everybody. So his wedding party consisted of Elton John, Sting, Bruce Springsteen, Bono. These were the people who were going to watch me sing this song for Darcy and Jeff at the wedding. I mean, and Robbie Buchanan was there and was going to play the keys, and it was him on the keys, and I would just sing. And I'm sitting there. I mean, it was surreal. Hans Zimmer, you know, one of the awesome, you know, legendary composer. And all these people, every solo male vocalist of the day, they're, you know, who'd been doing it, they were like the top of the business. I don't know how much, you know, mega record sales were sitting right there on this patio that was Darcy and Jeff's. It was like something got through it, you know. Everyone was nice. I can't remember. A couple of them, I can't remember if it was Sting or Bono. Someone came up and said, you know, nice job, something like that. And I sat, my girlfriend, my fiance at the time, Roxana, she was with me, and we sat and talked to Hans Zimmer for probably, I think we sat down and ate some food at the same table, and he and I talked for, I don't know, an hour and a half probably, you know. So another one of those like totally weird, surreal kind of things, you know. So yeah, overall, I mean, I look back, that was a terrific job to have had. It's unfortunate it couldn't have gone further, you know. But and that job, I had been doing Fame LA, and so I basically just got fitted right into that role because Trilogy did both those shows, Fame LA and The Outer Limits. So the producers from that just put me in that. But the cool thing about that is you get to go to Vancouver and you stay at the Sutton Place Hotel, which is great. And they had me on this, I had a great room. I felt so cool during this time. I had a great room with this balcony, top floor. It was like a penthouse-ish. I think it was like a suite, I think. And she's a really sweet lady. She's kind, she's nice to everybody, you know, she's got a good sense of humor, all that kind of stuff. And her role was to be, you know, protective of all these people, and I'm this horrible bad guy. And I remember I upset this old lady because we all had to cram into this one shot around this hospital bed, and my character was agitated and whatever, and she ends up like, we're trying to do this take, and something that, like, I got in the way. I think the camera was doing something, and I moved forward, and I really didn't mean to do anything, and I bumped her, and she, like, you know, like almost fell over, and then, you know, so I'm already the dick, the bad guy in the thing, and I have this attitude, you know, and then I knock over the old lady. It's just like, you know, and I was profusely apologizing, and yeah. So and Maria, of course, is, you know, she's attendant to the woman, you know, making sure everyone's all right and smoothing everything and stuff like that. So the deal with Brendan Fraser and me, we ended up going up against each other on a couple of things, but I think the first thing that was like that was unfortunate was the thing, he auditioned for Singles in Seattle, and they were holding auditions down here too, and the casting people had thought that they'd already seen me when they had seen him, because we were both, it was similar names, we looked kind of alike. And he'd auditioned there, and so they wouldn't see me here because they were convinced that they'd already seen me. And then and it wasn't going to be that big a deal. I didn't immediately change my name. But there were a couple of other things that he and I went up against each other for. One was a TV movie with Martin Sheen, and he did a great job in this. I mean, he was a good actor. I was glad. You know, I later saw, you know, when that finally came out, and he was a really good actor, powerful actor. And we went up. I also went up for School Ties, and I also went up for a little independent film called 20 Bucks. Yeah, and I remember sitting. My big, you know, disappointment with him was that I remember talking to him when we were in the casting waiting room for 20 Bucks, and I was like, so, do you know anything about, like, your family history or, you know, whatever? And he's like, I don't know, like totally acted like, either it was actor vibe, like, don't try to talk to me, don't try to, you know, whatever, being standoffish by way of it being protective of his work or something, I don't know, or he just really, you know, genuinely just didn't care, didn't have any idea, didn't want to, you know. And it's so weird to me in my family that just, you'd never hear that, you know. It's like if someone was a real, you know, he was real lame, or he was like mediocre, or just kind of adequate or something like that, you know, it could bug you. But Brendan Fraser's a really good actor. He's a really good actor. I mean, there are movies he's done I don't like, but you know, I've seen him, but he's really adequate. The only thing I didn't like is we both ended up in a magazine called In Fashion. I think it turned into something else. It was like a young Hollywood, and he was on one page, and then I think I was on one page, and then he was on the page back. I'm pretty sure I came first, but that might just be my ego talking. But anyway, we got interviewed, you know, and they had these, and something. It was either in that or something around that time. We were both doing a lot of press at that time, and he made some comment like, yeah, there's Brent Fraser. They asked him this similar kind of question, and they're like, yeah, but he's a musician. I'm the actor, you know. And I was like, I was stunning critics when you were still playing with your mom's dolls, you know. That's what my attitude was, like, how dare you, you know. But whatever, he probably just didn't know. I don't think he ever saw my work in Seattle or whatever. If there's anything to say about him, if he's, you know, just like in this, I won't be dismissive about someone like that. He's a decent actor. Whatever those confusions were of that time, you know, the guy's good. So I don't have any problem saying that. Some people do.
Please spare me the psychobabble, okay? I've had enough of it for one lifetime.
But I got to a point, I think, in my career where I would tend to isolate, and I think that I think it was fear. I think that I started to anticipate, when I would start to anticipate that I was gonna have to show up, like, I would like to come in, be your best friend, I'd do anything for you, but I couldn't be held to that, So I would keep a distance between myself and other people because I feared expectations being laid upon me, In my family, we're a Scottish family on both sides, my mom and my dad, but, I grew up in this culture of Scottishness that so much of it is this identity of fighting, and I have, a lot of military history in my family and all that kind of stuff, and that's what we do. I mean, Scottish people, that's what, we're everything from the shock troops to, that's what they do. They take Scottish soldiers and send them everywhere, and historically, always have done. And you kind of get this thing, I have an innate sort of visceral respect for combat, and it's natural to me to fight everyone and everything. And, unfortunately, in the arena of personal growth, you've got to at one point come, all of your pains, your discomforts, your whatever, no matter what's happened to you at some point as an adult person, you have to come to understand that you're making choices. Nothing's being done to you, It's not them, it's me, Once I ultimately really could own that choice, and I could look back and tell these stories, I have regrets that I offended people, I hurt people's feelings, or I denigrated somehow their craft or something like that. That's awful to think that I've done that to people that I respect and liked and cared about, but I did do that, and when I realized that my real foe, this whole, it became this thing about, well, if you're gonna fight, the whole idea of freedom, is that you can't get free, you can't win any of this, until you identify who your real foe is. And the real foe for me was if I could get the guy that's up here out of the way of the guy that's here, you can put all this information in here, but you have to have transformation in here, So that's sort of what it took. Then I could identify my real enemy, and that's this guy who's trying to make me have a totally miserable life, If you can fight that guy, you can get free. What I've come to understand is that all of those things, those fear-based drives, all start to go away. They're me-centered, and they start to lose control. They lose their grip on me when I can take some of my experience or something that I know and turn it to how can I help. So it becomes, instead of what's in it for me, it becomes how can I help. What's in it for me is going to be just fine. But what I know is that all the voices of fear and agitation and that kind of stuff and wanting, I'd love my career to be different now, but it's not, But it goes away when I turn my heart and my hands to helping someone else. I don't think about it. I think about them, I think about stuff that I can do for other people who feel, lost or alone or confused, whatever. And I have tons of experience with lost, alone, and confused. So I can be helpful. So it doesn't matter how far down the scale I went, that can benefit someone, And then I get peace again, So when I got this guy chewing on you need to be da-da-da-da, telling me how to muscle fuck some other situation to get something, then I'm just down and I'm just back in the same hole, restless, irritable, discontent. I mean, all that stuff just it's not just for artists, it's not just for actors or people in this field. We all have fears that to varying degrees govern decisions that we make about what we do in relationships, and so that really I was just, my life was more, that time I wasn't really conscious of that per se, so it was more, I was more subject to impulses like that I, I wasn't self-aware really, so it's probably TMI.